Welcome, my quiver of capitalists, the all-American, American history teacher, the gold standard of economics, and the sensei of supply side, Professor G here. And to start today, we are going to start with the Gospel of Gordon Gekko, who is one of my all-time favorite movie characters from the movie Wall Street. And one of the statements one of the quotes in the movie that Gordon Gekko says is that what's worth doing is worth doing for money. It's all about the bucks. The rest is conversation. And while that applies to us as workers as well, it's going to apply most for today's lesson, so the law of supply. And to introduce the law of supply, I want you to think about, as potentially seniors, that when you have the opportunity, or you have seen the opportunity for seniors to sell boxes of chocolate to raise money for chocolate bars, to raise money for senior dues. And think about, why do seniors have the ability and willingness to supply these bars of chocolate? It is about profit motive. So we're going to start off with a little math. I want you to think about this. I want you to think about the ability and willingness to sell chocolate bars, to go around the hallway asking students to buy candy for $1 and raise money for senior dues. So a chocolate bar is $1. To buy a box of chocolates, the input costs means the cost that is put in to doing business, the costs that a supplier has to pay before they can supply to the product market. So these are the costs of the factor market. And for seniors, it's one simple numerical cost: $30 for a box of chocolate. That's the low input cost of the senior in the factor market in which they get the box of chocolates. Now seniors, you can supply it to the student body. Chocolate bars per box, there are 60 bars per box. This means if you sell $1 a bar, 60 bars, your total revenue would be $60. However, that is not your profit. Your break-even is 30 bars, $30. The break-even is which your total revenue equals your input costs. So when you sell 30 bars, you have now broke even with your input cost. That 31st bar is your profit. And each box of chocolates has a total potential profit of $30. $60 total revenue minus $30 input cost and break even, $30. Now, let's go to the law of supply. The law of supply is the ability and willingness of businesses to produce, to give markets, to give products into goods and services into the product market for consumers. And today we're going to take a look at the change in quantity supplied and how it depends directly on the price of the product. And go back to our first quote, that price is profit. What's worth doing, in this case, what's worth supplying the market is worth doing for profit. For those seniors who know or have raised senior dues, for them it is worth doing. They are able and willing to do it because they will raise those $30. And now let's take a look at what happened. So at $1, this price. So here we have our law of supply. We'll take a look at why supply is an upward sloping curve, and it is upward sloping to show the direct relationship between price and quantity. How price is directly dependent on a business's ability and willingness to produce. And so let's say if we took a class survey at $1, think about it at home before pre-pandemic, if you would have for $1 that you knew the market value of chocolate was $1, would you have sold a box of chocolate to raise money for senior dues? Maybe 5 of you would have, 10 of you would have. So let's say 10. Think about if you would be, usually I have about a third or usually a quarter of my class does this. So let's say 10. Now, let's go back to our math here. What would happen if all of a sudden the market price, the accepted market price in the school, for a bar of chocolate now went up to $2? Let's go back to our math. A chocolate bar now has an accepted market price of $2. And remember, this is only from the supplier's perspective. A box of chocolate remains, the input costs remain $30. Only the market price is changing. The input costs remain constant. Now, and there are still 60 bars, so Aladdin saying, et ceteris paribus, everything else besides price remains the same. 60 bars of chocolate, $30 input cost, but now the accepted market price is $2 a bar. Now, this would bring our potential total revenue from $60. We have 60 times $2. The potential total revenue of each box, 60 times $2, is now $120. And now, at the same $2, to break even with your input costs, now you only have to sell 15 bars to break even. It is now twice as quick to break even. So break even is now 15 bars to reach that $30. And now the total profit, we now have $120 minus $30 is $90. So at $2, so now each box, instead of having a $30 profit, now has triple the profit, has $90 profit. So now, think a second, let's go back to our original survey. At $1 per bar, you would have made a $30 profit. But if the market was willing to pay $2 for a bar, you now would have a $90 profit per box. So now think, are you more willing and able to sell those chocolate bars to the student population? Odds are now, more of you are thinking, yes I am. Because what is worth doing is worth doing for money. And the amount of money, the amount of profit that you now have has increased, only because that price has increased. So, if the price goes up to $2, this would be an increase in the quantity supplied. Whereas 10 students may have been willing and able to supply bars at $1, that quantity supplied is now increased to 20 students. Or maybe even 30. And this is a movement along the curve. We go from here to now here. Why? You profit faster. You profit easier. It's worth doing. It's worth doing for money. So now we're going to take a look at the reverse. What happens if the accepted market price that the consumer is able and willing to pay now goes down to 75 cents? How will that affect the ability and willingness of suppliers to supply boxes of chocolate? So, at 75 cents, et ceteris paribus, all else being equal about the product, it is still the same standard chocolate bar. The input cost remains at $30, and the amount of chocolate bars per box is $60. Well, at 75 cents, the potential total revenue now goes from, at $1, remember it was $60, now the potential total revenue of each box at 75 cents per bar comes down to $45. Also, so now the potential total revenue has come down $15. Also frustrating for the supplier is it will now take longer to break even. At $1, it took 30 bars to break even. At 75 cents, it now takes 40 bars to equal the original input cost. So it now takes 10 bars longer to break even. And now, the most important, total profit. Let's see what happens. At 75 cents, the potential total revenue is $45. Minus the $30 to break even is only $15. So now as students, it takes you 60 bars. You have to sell 60 bars to only make $15. Think about that original survey. How willing and able are you, or would you be, to put the time and effort in to only make $15 profit? Odds are you're probably thinking, it's not me. It's not worth your time and not worth your effort of selling 60 bars to only make $15 per box. So this would be the only thing about the product that changed is the accepted market price, that market price. So this would be a decrease in quantity supplied. It would be a movement to the left. So at 75 cents, and maybe a few of you would still do it, so I'll put it in like 5. Because you still would be making money, although it would be much more difficult to. So at 75 cents, we see a movement to the left. And remember, we're comparing the supply curve to the x-axis of quantity supplied. That's why it is a change of quantity supplied. Change of quantity supplied is directly related to the price. So from $1, whereas 10 of you might have been willing to do it, at $2, many more of you would do it because your total potential profit was triple. Now, at 75 cents, your total potential profit goes down, is halved to $15. And so less of you would be less willing and less able to do it. whereas at the higher price, more of you would be more willing and more able to be suppliers. Now this has just been a change in quantity supplied due only to the direct relationship to price. In part 2 of the law of supply, just like law of demand, we are going to take a look at change in supply. And specifically, vocabulary-wise, change in supply is going to be due to a change in the amount of supply that businesses are willing and able to produce and give to the market due to something other than price changing. So in our next video, price is going to remain the same, but something else about the factor market is going to change. We'll see you in our next video. Remember, money never sleeps.